Today we're going to start reading Little Faith by Nickolas Butler, and we are going to start on chapter 1. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to flip to the page. The little boy giggled as he ran his small, soft hands down the old man's furrowed forehead, over his graying eyebrows, eyelids, and eyelashes, and then settled the blindfold just above his nose and ears before running off into the sunlit cemetery to hide. "Count to 20, Grandpa," the boy called out. "One Mississippi, two Mississippi, three Mississippi," said the old man loudly, in no hurry, patient as a dusty cabinet clock in a dining room corner. The sound of laughter receded. Lyle Hoved continued slowly counting. Pressing against his brow and eyelids, Lyle's red faded cotton handkerchief smelled of his worn Wrangler blue jeans. Diesel, gasoline, sawdust, the golden butterscotch candy he favored, and the metallic tang of loose pocket change. Before 6, he heard the little boy's breathing, his little footsteps growing fainter, the occasional crunch of a pine cone or fallen white pine branch under a sneaker, the squeak of long vernal grass in thick shadow, and giggling. By 12, there was just the sound of a crow caw-caw-cawing in the crown of the pine. At 17, he felt his heartbeat slowing. The April sunlight warming his face felt good, his old barn jacket a comfort like a tucked-in bed blanket. There was the desire to simply nod off, fall into the soft black sea of sleep. His counting slowed, nevertheless, and at 20, he pushed the blindfold up, opened his eyes, and the world was still there in 1,000 different shades of fragile, budding green and gently faded browns and yellows. There was no traffic on Cemetery Road, not a single car, no tractors tilling. In the sky, 2 sandhill cranes descended toward a far-off pond. His back was against his son Peter's headstone. He stood slowly, heard his knees pop in protest. He steadied himself against the granite slab. "Ready or not," he hollered, "here I come." It was a small cemetery, no more than a couple of hundred headstones. His shadow tipped away from his boots, long in the fading light. This grandson of his, Isaac, the only grandchild he knew, this 5-year-old boy, what energy he enjoyed. All day long, while Lyle's wife Peg and their daughter Shiloh shopped in Minneapolis, Lyle had been to entertain Isaac, which was no hardship at all. But my lord, did the boy run and run and run. It was only late afternoon, and already Lyle felt as tired as if he'd been laboring all day long, splitting wood perhaps, or throwing field rocks into a stone boat. "When I find you," Lyle called out, "when I find you." He walked slowly among the headstones, walked by the graves of old women and men he had known so many years ago, when, about Lyle's age now, they populated Redford, filling the pews of St. Olaf's Lutheran Church, or standing in the narrow, crowded aisles of Hanson's hardware store, pointing fingers at paint chips, studying cans of insecticide, or slope-shouldering bags of feed. Or there, again, pushing wobbly wheeled carts through the IGA, the husband navigating while the wife held her long scroll of a list, so much of their life meted out in delicate cursive. Old teachers, farmers, postmen, loggers, milkmen, mechanics, short order cookies, secretaries, dentists, doctors, firemen, butchers, bank tellers, barkeepers, taxidermists. He almost walked right by Isaac, but the boy chortled, and Lyle spotted him in the shadow of Old Man Egdal's gravestone. Part of the fun, Lyle knew, was in being found, so he fell upon the boy, tickling his soft belly, his armpits, and his neck, until Isaac had to catch his little breath. Satisfied, Lyle sat on the ground beside his grandson, and noticing the boy's shoelaces untied, went about knotting them anew. "You didn't make me take a nap today," Isaac said, licking his chapped lips. Lyle pouted the newly knotted shoes, reaching into his pocket, and handed the boy a small yellow pot of Carmex. "You're 5 years old. You can't take naps forever." "Grandma says that a person should never outgrow naps. She says everyone should take a nap every day. She says that in Spain and Portugal, they shut everything down in the afternoon so people can take their siestas." "What do you know about Portugal?" Lyle asked. The boy squinted at Lyle, dabbed a finger in the balm, and painted it on his lips. "You take naps sometimes, Grandpa." "What's that you say?" "You take naps in your chair, watching TV. You even snore." "Those aren't naps," Lyle smiled. They're breaks. Your grandpa's just taking a break. I don't think people are supposed to snore on their breaks, Grandpa. I don't snore. The little boy laughed. You do too. Mom even recorded it on her phone, and Grandma told me once that sometimes you even wake yourself up with your own snores. Lyle mussed up the kid's blonde hair. Come on now, let's clean up your uncle's headstone and then we can go visit Hoot. He's expecting us. Bet he might even have some ice cream waiting for you. From an old pipe located at the center of the cemetery, they filled two aluminum pails with cold well water, and Lyle dripped in a few beads of blue Dawn dish soap from small plastic bottles he'd bought from home, and then circulated his hand about the pail, making bubbles blossom and swirling rainbow iridescence. If you've lost your place, we're on the top of page 7 right now. Lyle carried the sloshing pails to the grave of his lost son, Peter, and together, sun on their shoulders and shining through the thin, translucent skin of their ears, he and Isaac washed the gravestone with steel wool bunched between their fingers. The afternoon was cooling with every passing minute. Their hands grew pink and cold. Tell me again, said the boy, what happened to him? Lyle worked his steel wool against the stone, scouring out bits of lichen and dirt. He looked at his grandson then, felt a surge of love for him, for he was such a kind, sensitive, and curious boy, and more than anything, these were the qualities Lyle increasingly valued in the world. He just wasn't healthy, he said at last, omitting the tragic specifics. He wasn't meant to stay, I guess. How long was he around? I mean, how old was he when? About 9 months. The boy nodded, kept on with his scrubbing, might have thought to himself, I'm so much older than him. Then, after a few moments, said, Grandpa, can we go to Hoots now? Rising from his knees, Lyle wiped his brow with the sleeve of his jacket and emptied the pails of sudsy water in long arcs out and away from the gravestones. One last thing, he said. Fill up this bucket here, will you? We'll rinse the stone clean and then we can head on out of here. He watched the boy race off with the empty bucket, watched him at the spigot, water sloshing near his tennis shoes, watched him lean down and open his mouth as if at a bubbler, some drinking fountain, water splashing against his tongue and lips and down his chin. Watched him turn the tap off and then return, water spilling copiously from the bucket with every labored step. Lyle took the bucket from his grandson and in 3 graceful motions sent splashes of water glancing off the face of the stone. The world, he knew, was divided into 2 camps of people, as it so often is, or as it's so oftentimes and simply reduced to being. Those who find cemeteries places of sadness and eeriness, and those, like him, who felt here a deep and abiding unity and evenness, as if the volume in his life were suddenly dimmed down, the way he imagined it might be, floating in outer space, looking out over everything, the immensity of it all. For Lyle, this was a place to be close to people long gone, a free and quiet place off the side of things, a place to not touch just his memories, but his future. Come on, he said, taking his grandson by the shoulder. Let's go. Hoot'll be waiting for you. Grandpa, I need to pee. Lyle glanced around, pointed toward a huge white pine on the periphery of the cemetery. Go water that tree over there, he said. We're on the top of page 9 now. Hustling toward its vast, wide trunk, the boy was already tugging his pants and underwear to his ankles. Lyle looked elsewhere, at an untilled field, a nearby dairy farm, the forest that filled the coulees. By and by, the boy returned to him. You're the only person I know who needs to pee more than me, Lyle said, but I've got an excuse. I think my bladder has a hole in it. A hole? The boy asked, squinting up at his grandfather. Must be a hole, or a few holes. How did you get a hole? Shot. An arrow it was. Passed clean through me. Left this hole right here. He touched his belly button. The boy laughed. Grandpa, that's where your umbilical cord was. The one that connected you to the placenta. I've got one too. Everyone does. Oh, said Lyle. I forgot about that. Thought that's where I was shot. And how does he know these things? Placenta? Portugal? He guided the boy to his old Ford F-150, opened the passenger door for him, shut it firmly. Then he walked around the back of the truck and turning, looking at the little boy's head, simply staring forward, waiting for him. He ran his hands along the rust of the tailgate, the scabby flakes of chipped paint. He climbed in, sat heavily behind the wheel, breathed in the cab's dust and gasoline, It's mildewed AAA maps and cinnamon. He turned to the boy. You've been stealing my gum. But the boy only smiled and continued chewing, giggling just a little. So that's where all my gum goes. I thought the mice were taking it. All right, guys, that's the end of chapter 1. I'll see you back here for chapter 2.